Welcome to Introduction to Sociology. We will begin outlining the chapters found in your textbook, Society, the Basics, by John J. Mishonis. In Chapter 1, we learn about the perspective, theory, and methods in sociology. Let's begin. What is sociology? Sociology is a discipline that looks at the systematic study of human society. It's systematic in that it is a discipline that focuses on the patterns of behavior in particular people. We will be looking at the patterns of behavior in people in our human society. Society is the people that live together in a defined territory. We share a certain culture together. That could be the United States, it could be Georgia, it could be any area in which you live near other people. The primary focus of human society and sociology is how groups influence each other and how they influence us. At the heart of sociology, and one of the most important ideas that you will gain from this course, is to learn to have this sociological perspective. The sociological perspective is a way of looking at society a little bit differently than what you're used to. You will begin to see that society shapes your personal decisions in a systematic way. The sociological perspective helps you see that there are general behaviors, general patterns of behavior in particular people. And so again, society shapes what you think and what you do, more than what you think. Let's look at this a little bit closer. Let's look at the example of the personal decision of childbearing. Looking at the map, you see that one lady lives in the United States. She's 29 years old, and she's having her very first child. If you look at the other side of the world, you'll see that another lady the same age, just about the same age, has 6 children. And this is a common pattern where she lives. How do the places where we live affect our childbearing decisions? While you're thinking about that, consider the different culture, the different levels of education, and the different roles of women in these different parts of the world. Are you starting to see that society is affecting some very personal decisions? So in this course, we will look at a global perspective. We will look at the entire world in contrast to where we live. The importance of a global perspective includes a few different things. One of the things that you need to be aware of is that where we live makes a difference in shaping our lives. Societies are very connected now because of technology. So our way of life in one part of the world is going to affect the way of what happens in another part of the world. Also, it will help you understand that the problems that we face here in the United States are not the same as other parts of the United States, and it helps you have a little perspective. Also, 8 out of 10 United States jobs involve international trade. When you enter the workforce, you may become aware of that. So a global perspective is very important for us to have, and we all affect each other in this big, big world we live in because of our interconnectedness. Let's go back to the idea about how the world affects the choices that we make. Emil Durkheim is a very important figure in sociology, and he did some research, or conducted some research, that showed another example of how society affects our very personal choices. Emil Durkheim looked at suicides. He looked at who was most likely or more likely to commit suicide, and he concluded that male Protestants who were wealthy and single, unmarried, were more likely to commit suicide. He also found that it was less likely for males that were Jewish or Catholic and who were lower income individuals but were married were less likely to commit suicide. His basic findings found a common thread, and what that was social integration. He concluded that the differences between the groups had to do with their connectedness to other individuals, and that those with strong social ties had less of a chance of committing suicide. So Emil Durkheim's study shows us that society affects another very important decision that people make, and that is committing suicide. Emil Durkheim's findings still hold true today. Let's look at the map. This map shows the numbers of suicides that are recorded in today's times. What do you see? The green areas of the country show that there are higher rates of suicide. The plains and mountain regions across the mountainous Appalachian region have very low populations. People are more isolated in these areas, so it contributes to a higher rate of suicide. Look at the lighter colored areas, the peach, and where we live in Georgia, and the gray areas. These areas have higher populations, and there is a lower number of suicides. So this still even holds true today. Matters of personal choices are affected by society, where we live. And this further proves that Emil Durkheim's research is still valid today. So what are the advantages of learning to think in a sociological manner? There are many advantages that will assist you in your world as you enter the workforce and live your personal and professional lives. First of all, the number one advantage listed of sociological thinking includes the guiding of laws and policies. Sociological research has led to many different social policies and changes that support people whenever there are patterns found in certain populations. Child support laws are an example of this. Number two, it helps you make sense of your individual life. Whenever something occurs in your life, if you're able to take a sociological perspective and see that you are just a piece of a bigger pattern of behavior that's affecting you, it will completely change the way you look at what is happening in your life. An example in our textbook is one of a gentleman that received a termination notice from his employment. Normally, in every day, whenever someone loses their job, and we have a lot of that going on now, people tend to take that as a sign of their individual failure. In the example in the book, the gentleman was able to understand that his job loss was part of a bigger system, a bigger network going on globally. And it completely changed the way he felt about himself and about what was happening to him. And that is certainly relevant today. Number three, it helps us live in a diverse world. If you understand the patterns of behaviors and the actions that occur in society, and you're able to look at it in a sociological manner, through the sociological perspective, you will understand that things that happen and occur are part of a bigger network of patterns that are going on. It helps you play the game, so to speak. If you understand that society deals you or life deals you a set of cards, you can better understand how to play your cards if you understand the bigger picture of the patterns that are occurring in society. Number four is the idea that sociological thinking can empower us to be active participants in society. Whenever things are occurring in the patterns of a society that groups or people may think are not right or unfair, people can come together and they can change laws and patterns of behavior that are not suitable to those of us that observe them. Lastly, sociology will prepare you for your future job, your occupation. People who work in different fields can be better at their job and more effective in the people that they encounter if they understand sociological thinking and you use a sociological perspective in the way that you look at how your job interacts with the bigger picture, the bigger world. If you work in criminal justice, the sociological advantage will help you understand what categories of people are most at risk of becoming criminals or victims. It can help you understand how policing policies and programs help prevent crime, why people turn to crime in the first place, etc. If you work in the healthcare field, such as nursing or any other healthcare occupation. It can help you understand the patterns of health and illnesses within the population. Society has a big effect on all of this. Any job that you encounter, you can be more effective if you have sociological thinking, because you're most likely going to interact with other people in any job that you have. So there are many advantages to sociological thinking, and this course should be very helpful to you as you enter the world of work. Let's look at how sociology began. Sociology, first of all, is a science, just like economics or physics. It is a way of studying or looking at how the world operates, and it is somewhat predictable according to different laws, just like any other science. Sociology is a new discipline. It's one of the youngest academic disciplines, and it did not get its name until the term was coined by Auguste Comte in 1838. Prior to this, all the way back through history to 300 and 400 BC, philosophers were very interested in studying society and imagining a perfect society. But Auguste Comte was interested in studying society as it really was, as it was operating right before us in the present. So when he coined this term, he was referring to a discipline that would study the patterns of society, just as we discussed is the actual definition of sociology. So sociology emerged as a result of many decades and hundreds of years of social change. Moving forward to the 17th and 18th century in the Age of Enlightenment, and we start to see the Industrial Revolution, which was a huge shift in the way that people in society live. During the Industrial Revolution, which started in Europe, it swept into the United States later. But before that, during the Middle Ages, people lived on farms, and they lived with their families, and they plowed fields, and they made their own products to live. So when the Industrial Revolution occurred, people started moving into cities, and factories came about. This is where we start to see the growth of cities and all the social problems that came with it. We start to see the ills of society, so to speak. We start seeing things like pollution, crime, homelessness, children unattended, child labor. All of these different things were starting to occur, and people were starting to take notice. In addition to that, we start to see the decline of tradition, people living according to tradition. And as people are starting to move together in these big cities, all of these social problems are starting to come about. This was a huge change in the way that we live and the way that we see society. In addition, during this time, we also have a lot of political change happening. We start to see a move from the belief that we have moral duties to God and religion and kings, and philosophers started to talk about personal liberty, individual rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So all of these things coming together is the social change that pushed us towards this discipline of sociology. So Comte has, in his approach to looking at society, he has this idea called positivism. So positivism is just what it states, a way of understanding society based on science, based on facts. He believed that society operates according to certain laws, just like the physical world operates according to gravity and all of those other laws of nature. So he believed that by using science, we could understand not only the physical world, but look at society based on facts, based on science. So by the beginning of the 20th century, sociology had taken hold in the United States, and that's how sociology came to be. So now that you know what sociology is and how it came about, let's look at sociological theory. So this is very important that you are able to understand that the job of sociological theory is to explain social behavior. And in sociology, when we talk about what theory actually is, if you don't have a theory, you have a bunch of facts, and you have a bunch of facts flying around in the air. Imagine that, and they're not connected in any certain kind of way. So a theory is a statement of how they're related. It explains social behavior when we're talking about sociology. So we want a theory to explain some type of social behavior. So sociologists use one of three major approaches in their research. So these three approaches are going to be like a roadmap. They're going to guide the thinking of the sociologist. It is a way of looking at society. It's kind of a unique perspective that a person has. You're going to have one of these three. So this is, imagine there's a big statue in the room, and you look at the statue from the left, then you look at it from the right, then you look at it from the middle. It's still the same statue, the same societal issue, but there's three different ways to look at it. So one of each of these is going to guide the sociologists as they start to develop ideas, hypotheses, and they start to test these. So let's look at each one of these three approaches. If you look at the picture, we'll first look at the structural functional approach. If you have a structural functional approach to looking at an issue or something in society, then you're going to consider the idea that it's a system of interrelated parts that work together. They work together to promote stability. So if I'm looking at society, I'm going to say, well, this is happening in order to keep this in place, or, this is happening and it makes this happen, and everything works together in an orderly way. And this is a macro level view. That means that we're looking at a big picture of society. So the questions that the sociologist is looking at is how is society held together? What are the major parts? How are they linked? It makes society function. Just remember the word function. If you look at the second area, the second approach, social conflict, the second two are subcategories, but let's focus on social conflict approach. If you come from this framework, then you're going to look at society as a system of inequalities. So a big part of social conflict theory is some type of inequality in society. This is also a macro level view. That means it's a big picture view. So they look at things like how do some things in society benefit one category of people more than it benefits other categories. It looks at inequality. A big piece of social conflict is the social inequality will cause conflict that leads to social change. Karl Marx is a big social conflict theorist we'll talk about in a moment. If you are looking at something in society through the lens of social conflict approach, you're going to be asking questions about like this. How does society divide a population? How do disadvantaged people challenge the system or seek change? Social conflict approach basically looks at some system of social inequality. Let's look at the third and last approach, symbolic interaction approach. You will notice that this is a micro level view. Micro level means that it has more to do with the interaction of me and you one-on-one. It's a close-up view, a micro level view. In this approach, society is an ongoing process. It means that how I interact with you up close is going to change our interaction. So people interact in different settings. We use symbolic communications. We understand each other. We assign meaning to different objects and different things that we do. The last part of it says that the reality that people experience is always changing. So what I do when I'm right in front of you is going to change something that you do. And it's not a very predictable interaction because you never know what the other person is going to do. The questions that are asked in this approach, how do people experience society individually? How do you shape the reality you experience? How do behavior and meaning change from person to person? So under these three different approaches, we're going to be looking at society differently. If I'm in the structural functional approach, I'm going to look at some issue of society as having a role to play because it's a part of a system that works and it keeps everything functioning stable in a stable way. If I come from the social conflict approach, I'm going to look at society based on inequality. And I'm going to look at how some portion of society benefits more than other portions of society. And again, symbolic interaction. This is my micro level view. And if I come from this approach, I'm going to look at an up close interaction between people. And I'm going to look at how different things change as we interact with each other and how we assign meaning to those things. So this is an important part of your course to understand the three major theoretical approaches that sociologists use as a framework whenever they're trying to do research on some particular area. We're not going to focus particularly on race conflict or feminism and the gender conflict because they're subcategories of the larger conflict approach, social conflict approach. Next, we're going to look at three pioneers of sociology. Just very quickly, just like you know, Isaac Newton is central to the discipline of physics. These are three important pioneers of sociology: Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, who we've already mentioned, and Max Weber. Just quickly, Karl Marx, he is a social conflict theorist, and we'll talk more about him in later chapters. Emil Durkheim, he is a structural functional theorist. So all of his ideas have to do with that stability of interrelated parts in society. He also is the one we just talked about who mentioned that we mentioned did a study of suicide. He integrated social theory in research to come to the conclusion of why more people commit suicide in certain groups. Max Weber is a symbolic interaction theorist. So let's look at those three approaches and let's look at one specific piece of society, and let's apply all three of the approaches so you can see how they may look when we're looking at society. First, the social conflict analysis. If we look at sports through the social conflict analysis, we might see we're going to see inequalities, but you might point out that the roles that people play on the field have to do with their social standing, and there are inequalities attached to that. There's something called stacking. Stacking has to do with what the demographics of each player looks like on the field. So we have a baseball field and we have a football field, and you start to see that there are inequalities in the positions that people play. So a social conflict approach would start to look for inequalities in sports. All right, let's look at symbolic interaction approach in sports. So remember, this is a micro level view, and we're looking at an up close and ongoing process of interaction. So you might imagine that we might look at the players on the field, and if one of those players is changed or replaced, maybe in baseball it might be the shortstop position, and somebody different is placed in that position, you're going to see a change in the way the players interact with each other, and even in the way that the crowd interacts with the game. So symbolic interaction approach is going to look at an ongoing up-close process that is ever-changing between the players on the field. Lastly, the structural functional approach, if you recall, it looks at society as a system of interrelated parts that help each other operate. So if we look at sports through the lens of the structural functional approach, we're going to look at how structural functional approach is going to look at how society values sports. How does sports help society operate? There's that word operate again, functional, operate. So when you think about sports in our society, think about what it does to help society operate. I'll give you a second to think about that. You're probably thinking about how sports uplifts people's spirits. You're probably thinking about how sports pumps a lot of money into the economy, or how sports helps any individual who has a gift, an athletic gift, to become successful. So in the structural functional approach, if we're looking at sports, we're seeing that it helps society operate in all those ways I mentioned and any more that you can think of. So again, all three of the approaches that we've been learning about, they provide different insights into something, some aspect of society. As it states on the screen, there's not a right or wrong approach to use, but you may find that in your thinking, you kind of drift or gravitate towards one or the other. It's just a different way of looking at some aspect of society, and it provides you a roadmap whenever you start to do research on some topic in sociology. So those are the three approaches in sociology. Okay, so the last chapter is about research in sociology. All right, there's three approaches to the way that researchers do their sociology research. The scientific approach is what we talked about earlier, kind of like Durkheim's research. It uses empirical evidence. It looks at what people do. It looks at behavior. We observe behavior of what people are doing, and we can verify it using data. It's sometimes called the empirical approach. The second one is interpretive sociology. It's just like the name says. It focuses on the meanings that people attach to what they're doing. Instead of just looking at what people do, it looks at kind of why they're doing it, and it makes an interpretation about that. The last one, critical sociology, is also kind of like interpretive sociology. It is looking at, it's more objective. It holds that reality is not fixed. It's not just this is the way it is. It has the idea that reality can be interpreted, kind of like the interpretive piece. But the biggest piece about critical sociology is that it looks at social change, the need for something to change. Instead of looking at how much inequality there is, it looks at why, should we have this much inequality? What needs to change? Lastly, I want to look at the 4 research methods. All right, so whenever you read a study and it says, 25% of dentists recommend that you should use this type of toothpaste. 25 is low, so I should have said 99%, right? They use some type of a research method. So you can think back to your science fair and how you had to do some type of experiment. And that actually is the first research method, an experiment. And you have seen this, like I said, probably in high school. This is whenever you want to explain something and you want to connect the relationship between two things. This happens because of this, right? And so an experiment is going to be actually, doing some testing on something that is there. All right, and you're looking for cause and effect. The survey, how many times have you been asked to fill out a survey online whenever you go to a website? So you know what a survey is. You basically answer some questions. Then the person's going to take all the survey answers that they get and they're going to do some statistical testing to see, and make some decisions about why people answered the way that they did. And so it's sampling. It uses questionnaires. Participant observation is when you look at people in a setting, all right? An experiment, the first method we looked at is when you set up sort of a pretend situation. In a participant observation, you're going to look at people in their natural setting, doing what they do, and then you're going to make some observations about that. The last one is using existing sources. Think about Emil Durkheim's research. He most likely looked at data that had to do with suicides, like death certificates and that kind of information. So using existing sources, researchers can make a lot of statistical tests and draw a lot of conclusions based on that. So these are 4 ways that sociological research can actually be completed. All right. The sociological investigation at the end of our chapter, it's just like your science fair. I kind of mentioned that earlier. You're going to select a topic. What are you interested in? Are you interested in why some type of event happens to one gender or another? Are you interested in how many children are in foster care? you're interested in some type of topic. You're going to review the literature. You're going to develop some questions, some hypothesis, right? Hypotheses. You're going to assess the requirements that you need for your study. You're going to select a research methodology. And in sociology, you're going to come at it from one of those three sociological approaches. You're going to collect data, whatever that looks like. And then you're going to interpret, what does this mean? And you're going to write your conclusions on what it means. And this is what these journal articles look like that you have read or that you will read during your college career. That is the end of our presentation. Today we learned about what exactly sociology is, why is it important to you, and we also learned, the origins of sociology, and we learned about the three important approaches to sociology, and we also looked at research methods that sociologists use. That is the conclusion of Chapter 1.